It used to be unthinkable, the idea that Harley-Davidson, Harley, could ever fall. But now, dealerships are shutting down, riders are switching brands, and the CEO just walked out the door. So the question is no longer when Harley will recover, it's whether it even can. Is Harley defeated, or is this just the calm before the collapse? What's happening? Harley-Davidson was never just a motorcycle company. It was an anthem written in chrome and thunder. To ride a Harley was to believe in something. Freedom, rebellion, grit. The name wasn't just printed on bikes, it was tattooed on skin. It roared down Route 66. It flew like a flag at Sturgis. It spoke to every man and woman who ever looked at the horizon and thought, I want to go there on my own terms. For over 100 years, Harley held a kind of mythic status in the American imagination. It wasn't just about motorcycles, it was about identity. The heavy jackets, the custom patches, the growl of a V-twin engine echoing off a desert canyon. It was the spirit of the outlaw, and the patriot rolled into one. It stood for self-determination, for non-conformity, for that distinctly American love of the open road and the middle finger. But myths don't last forever, especially when no one's left to tell the story. Today, something has changed. That roaring, rebellious soul has gone quiet. Younger riders aren't dreaming of their first Harley. They're buying used Hondas or saving up for an Indian Scout. The once thriving Harley owners group chapters have emptied. Dealerships that used to host packed weekend rides now struggle to get a dozen riders together. Harley isn't just facing a sales problem, it's facing a meaning problem. The sales collapse no one wants to talk about. If Harley-Davidson's cultural collapse felt like a slow erosion, the financial collapse was more like a landslide. The warning signs had been visible for years. Declining youth interest, softening global sales, aging customer base. But in the final quarter of 2024, the numbers finally told the truth that no press release could spin. Revenue in Q1 dropped by 35% compared to the same quarter a year earlier. That wasn't a dip, that was a cliff. And it wasn't just seasonal slowdown or one bad product cycle, it was systemic. Full-year profits declined by 11%, missing every internal and investor forecast by a mile. The damage wasn't isolated, it was spreading. Dealerships across the country began shuttering, especially in rural towns that once treated Harley shops like sacred ground. In Wisconsin, Missouri, Arizona, longtime anchor stores that had survived every economic cycle since the 80s quietly closed their doors. Staff were laid off, service centers went dark, and communities lost not just a business, but a piece of themselves. The stock reflected the pain. Over the past decade, Harley's stock performance has fallen more than 40%, despite temporary rebounds fueled by electric bike announcements or nostalgia-fueled marketing. Compared to Tesla, which saw a sharp one-year decline, Harley's stock bled out slowly. Investors didn't panic, they just left. Even Harley-Davidson Financial Services, the company's in-house lender, began to falter. As more customers defaulted on motorcycle loans and resale values dropped, the financial arm started dragging down the brand it was supposed to support. Loan losses increased, margin forecasts shrank, and suddenly Harley wasn't just a bike maker, it was a financial liability. The numbers spoke louder than any brand statement. Harley-Davidson was not just losing relevance, it was losing ground, losing money, and losing time. And behind those losses, a CEO who promised a comeback and left instead. Jochen Zeitz is leaving. But is that too late? When Jochen Zeitz was named CEO in 2020, he was supposed to be the outsider who could fix everything. He wasn't just a businessman. He was the man who had revived Puma from near death in the 90s. The Harley board saw him as a clean break, a strategist, a visionary. But Jochen wasn't Harley. He came from the world of shoes and fashion, not blue jeans and gasoline. And while his track record in branding and global repositioning was impressive, his connection to the American motorcycling heartland was paper thin. He had ridden motorcycles before. He had sat on Harley's board since 2007, but to many riders, he never felt like one of them. Zeitz launched the Hardwire strategy, a 5-year plan focused on premium positioning, global expansion, electric vehicles, and ESG alignment. He championed Livewire, Harley's electric spin-off. He leaned into DEI initiatives, He focused on urban branding, global partnerships, and modernizing the image of a company built on outlaw tradition. Some applauded the move. Harley needed change, but others saw it differently. They felt Harley was being sterilized, neutered, turned into something sleek and soulless, something not for them. Then came the earnings reports, the dealer backlash, the cultural confusion. By early 2025, Zeitz had announced his intention to retire. Official statements framed it as a natural transition. 5 years of foundational leadership, they said, but the timing told a different story. He was stepping down just as Harley forecast another year of declining profits across all divisions. To this day, no permanent successor has been named. The board is still hunting. Interim leadership is holding the wheel. But Harley is adrift. Its most consequential CEO since the AMF era is gone. And his legacy? It's not a brand reboot. It's a brand in limbo. And while executives debated strategy, the riders made their decisions silently. But this isn't the first time Harley was left for dead. We put in the hours to connect the dots. Not for clicks, but because the truth matters. If you're with us, subscribe. There's more coming. AMF and the rebellion that saved Harley. By the late 1960s, Harley-Davidson was already running out of gas. The company that had once symbolized American strength and freedom was sputtering, burdened by financial instability, aging infrastructure, and mounting pressure from more efficient Japanese manufacturers. In 1969, salvation seemed to arrive in the form of a corporate lifeline, a merger with American Machine and Foundry, or AMF. Known for making bowling equipment and lawnmowers, AMF promised Harley capital, production scale, and a shot at survival. But that merger turned out to be a deal with the devil. AMF didn't understand Harley's soul. What it saw was a struggling manufacturer that can be whipped into shape with more volume and less nuance. In their effort to scale quickly, AMF slashed costs, automated assembly lines, and pushed out motorcycles like they were toasters. What followed was a collapse in quality, unlike anything Harley riders had seen. Oil leaks, warped frames, shoddy wiring. Bikers who had once worn the Harley logo like armor now found themselves pushing broken-down machines off the side of the road. Meanwhile, the Japanese manufacturer Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, and Kawasaki were rolling out bikes that didn't leak, didn't overheat, and started on the first try. They weren't just cheaper, they were better. American riders noticed, so did the press. By the mid-70s, Harley was no longer the proud symbol of rebellion. It was the punchline of a reliability joke. The phrase, "Made in America," began to lose its power, and Harley, more than any other brand, became the symbol of that humiliation. But things didn't just fall apart on the showroom floor, they imploded on the factory floor. In 1974, the breaking point came. Workers at the York, Pennsylvania facility, the heart of Harley's production, walked off the job. This wasn't just a labor dispute over wages or hours. This was a revolt against a company that had betrayed its own bloodline. These weren't just employees. Many were riders themselves. They didn't just build Harleys, they believed in them. And now, they barely recognized what they were putting together. The strike lasted over 40 days. 40 days of empty assembly lines, 40 days of dust collecting on unsold bikes, 40 days of lost orders and furious dealerships. AMF executives were blindsided. Their golden acquisition was bleeding cash and alienating the very workers they needed to survive. Inside boardrooms, panic set in. Some proposed selling Harley to foreign investors. Others suggested shutting it down entirely. There was no strategy, just fear. AMF had underestimated how deeply rooted Harley's identity was in the people who built it. And now, those people were fighting back. Outside the plant, the brand took another beating. News crews aired footage of picket lines and angry union speeches. Customers watched their beloved motorcycle company unravel in real time. And in garages across America, riders began asking a painful question out loud. Maybe Japanese bikes really are better. But amid the chaos, something unexpected began to happen. Inside Harley, a small group of engineers, designers, and executives quietly began drawing up plans, not for AMF's survival, but for Harley's rebellion. They believed the company didn't need saving from a conglomerate. It needed saving from itself. It needed to be reclaimed, not rescued. That idea became a movement. That movement became a plan. And that plan would soon lead to one of the most daring corporate takebacks in American history. Harley wasn't dead yet, but it was about to be reborn in the loudest, most unexpected way imaginable. They weren't ready to give up. They were ready to fight back. But Harley didn't die. It got rescued by the people who believed in it most. How one engine saved an entire brand. Harley-Davidson was on the verge of collapse and its workers were demoralized, its bikes derided and its brand tarnished beyond recognition. And that's when something extraordinary happened. A group of 13 Harley-Davidson executives led by Vaughn Beals and Willie G. Davidson orchestrated a leveraged buyout of the company. They put everything on the line, careers, reputations, and financial futures, to wrest control away from AMF and return Harley to its roots. But regaining control was just the beginning. They needed a symbol of rebirth, something tangible, something loud. And that symbol arrived in 1984. The Evolution engine. The Evo, as it became known, wasn't just an improvement, it was a declaration. Built from the ground up for reliability, power, and performance, it marked Harley's long overdue engineering comeback. Gone were the oil leaks and overheating issues. The Evo ran clean, strong, and durable, able to match and in many cases outperform the Japanese imports that had dominated for the past decade. But the engine wasn't the only innovation. Inspired by Japanese lean manufacturing, Harley adopted just-in-time production methods, cutting waste, reducing delays, and boosting quality control. Suddenly, Harley was no longer a punchline. It was a problem for its competitors. Dealers returned, riders returned. Even the media, once critical, began publishing stories of Harley's unlikely comeback. And with every Evo engine that rumbled down a highway, a message was sent. Harley was back. But perhaps most importantly, pride returned to the factory floor. The same workers who had walked out during the AMF years were now staying late. They were proud again. They believed again. And that belief translated into motorcycles that felt handcrafted, not churned out. The Evo era didn't just stabilize Harley, it redefined it. The company that had been days away from vanishing was now a symbol of American grit and redemption. But technology wasn't enough. Harley needed to become a religion, and that magic carried them for decades, until they broke it themselves. When strategy ignores the streets, there's a difference between building a motorcycle and building a spreadsheet. In 2020, Harley-Davidson rolled out the Rewire, a corporate overhaul designed to stabilize the company. It focused on cost-cutting, trimming down overseas operations, and reducing complexity in the product line. Harley laid off more than 700 employees. It announced a shift back to its core segments. It was surgical, precise, and completely disconnected from the streets. The Rewire was followed by the Hardwire. Jochen Zeitz's grand vision to push Harley into its next chapter. It promised 6 strategic priorities over 5 years, including the expansion of touring and cruiser platforms, heavy investment into electric vehicles, and a push to turn Harley into a premium lifestyle brand. At first, it sounded bold, but to many dealers and riders, it felt like watching a CEO solve a brand problem with a PowerPoint. The results were devastating in subtle, almost invisible ways. Models like the Street 500 and Street 750 were quietly discontinued. Those same entry-level bikes that allowed blue-collar riders and younger enthusiasts to actually own a Harley. By eliminating them, Harley cut off its own access ramp to new customers. Without affordable options, the average working-class American now had to fork over $16,000 to $30,000 just to get started. Meanwhile, Livewire was spun off into its own separate electric motorcycle company. The idea was to protect the core Harley brand while pursuing innovation on the side. But this too confused customers. If Harley wasn't making the Livewire anymore, was it even part of the brand? Who was it for? No one could answer. Inside dealerships, things got worse. Fewer models, fewer price points, less foot traffic, more skepticism. Riders who walked in looking for that iconic rideable rebellion were met with complex payment plans, unfamiliar marketing language, and a company seemingly obsessed with chasing luxury customers who never really asked for a Harley in the first place. And yet, the boardroom stayed the course. Strategy meetings emphasized margins, not loyalty. Reorganization memos replaced real conversations with dealers. What once was a rider-first brand had become a corporate maze of slogans and segmentation. By 2024, the disconnect had become undeniable. Harley wasn't just losing customers, it was losing clarity. No clear product ladder, no defined audience, just a tangle of initiatives that sounded ambitious but landed flat on the showroom floor. And the one man tasked with steering the ship, he never quite looked like he belonged on the bike. Can a German CEO lead an American legend? Jochen Zeitz had the resume, he had the credentials, he even had the boardroom buzzwords, but what he never had was the trust of the riders. And in a brand like Harley-Davidson, that trust is everything. Born and raised in Germany, Zeitz made his name as the man who saved Puma in the early 2000s. He transformed the brand, modernized operations, and became known as a stylish turnaround expert. When Harley's board brought him in as CEO in 2020, it was seen as a bold move, a break from the past. But to many riders, it felt like a betrayal. Harley wasn't Puma. It wasn't about fashion. It wasn't about global lifestyle positioning. It was about wrenching in your garage, about riding through the rain, about being American in a way that no other brand could replicate. And suddenly, a man who had never grown up around that culture was calling the shots. That cultural gap became a political wound. Many of Harley's most loyal customers came from red states, rural communities, veterans, working-class towns. When Zeitz started pushing DEI programs, green branding, and electric mobility goals, it didn't just feel tone-deaf, it felt invasive, like someone was trying to rewrite a song they had never actually listened to. Dealers complained that headquarters was out of touch. Riders started calling Harley the corporate bike. Forum posts accused the brand of selling out. Even Harley's merchandising started to feel less like rebellion and more like retail. The question wasn't just, can he save the company? It became, does he even get it? And over time, even Zeitz seemed to sense that maybe the answer was no. He announced his retirement in 2025, but by then the damage was already done. And while Harley stalled, its rivals went full throttle. Indian's revenge. How America's other icon took the crown. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. For over 100 years, Harley-Davidson reigned supreme, not just as a motorcycle manufacturer, but as a cultural monolith. It represented American rebellion, chrome-streaked freedom, and the thundering roar of an open highway. For decades, Indian motorcycle was the underdog, a nostalgic footnote in Harley's long and loud history. But something changed. Quietly, methodically, and almost poetically, Indian did the unthinkable. It beat Harley at its own game. At the center of this comeback story is the Indian Scout, a bike that didn't just compete with Harley's Sportster, it outclassed it. The Scout brought sleek design, aggressive engineering, and raw performance without sacrificing heritage. It had what Harley used to offer but no longer did: soul, without sloppiness. Riders who once would have chosen a Sportster without question suddenly found themselves straddling a Scout and realizing it felt like the bike they had always wanted Harley to build. The Indian FTR took things even further. While Harley was sinking time and capital into the ill-fated Livewire and shrinking its lineup, Indian launched a street machine rooted in American flat-track racing DNA. The FTR wasn't a direct competitor to any Harley. It was a warning shot. It showed the world that Indian wasn't just here to chase Harley's legacy, it was building one of its own. But Indian's strategy wasn't built on hype, it was built on infrastructure. As Harley closed dealerships across the country, some that had operated for decades, Polaris, Indian's parent company, quietly stepped in. In city after city, Harley signs were replaced by Indian banners. Where there was once nostalgia and tradition, there was now renewal and rebirth. Indian didn't just want market shares, it wanted the soul of the American road. Polaris understood something fundamental: heritage has to evolve. Harley spent the last decade trying to choose between past and future, pleasing no one in the process. Indian embraced both. It honored the retro look, the thick fenders, the heavy pipes, but fused it with technology and design that didn't feel like it was stuck in the 1980s. Riders noticed, and more importantly, they responded. The numbers told the story. Indian, once considered a boutique alternative, began gaining momentum year after year. Word of mouth spread. YouTube reviewers who once worshipped Harleys began praising Indians. New riders, especially those in their 30s and 40s, didn't feel they had to apologize for choosing a different American brand. In fact, they took pride in it, because Indian didn't just feel like a smart purchase, it felt like a rebellion against Harley itself. And as Harley chased premium pricing, alienated its working class base, and pivoted toward abstract brand strategies, Indian leaned into the road. It offered performance, price, pride, and a sense of belonging. It became the bike Harley once was. But Indian wasn't the only one capitalizing on Harley's confusion, because across oceans and borders, other players were preparing their own quiet invasions, and they were about to change the global motorcycle landscape forever. Honda, Enfield, and the foreign invasion. Harley-Davidson once looked at foreign brands as competition, not replacements, but somewhere between its obsession with premium image and its strategic disarray, it left a vacuum that global manufacturers were more than happy to fill. And they didn't just compete, they redefined the rules of the road. Start with Royal Enfield. For years, it was considered a niche classic brand with limited global appeal. But by 2023, something unexpected happened. Royal Enfield outsold Harley-Davidson worldwide. It wasn't a fluke, it was the result of strategic precision. Enfield's lineup, simple, durable, and accessible, connected with riders in ways Harley hadn't in years. The classic 350, the Meteor, the Hunter, all bikes that blended retro charm with modern reliability at prices Harley couldn't come close to matching. Then there's Honda. The Rebel 500 and Rebel 1100 began eating into Harley's entry in mid-tier markets. These were bikes that looked good, felt responsive, and didn't require buyers to take out second mortgages. Honda's Goldwing, meanwhile, continued to dominate the luxury touring segment, evolving with time, while Harley's full dressers grew heavier and more expensive. BMW also entered the fray. The R18 Cruiser, a deliberate attempt to mimic Harley's big twin experience, offered German engineering with American styling. It wasn't perfect, but it proved one thing. Other brands could build Harley-like bikes that were often more refined, more efficient, and more reliable. The one thing these global brands all shared was consistency. While Harley spent years chasing identity and flirting with innovation for innovation's sake, companies like Honda, Enfield, and BMW simply delivered. Reliable, affordable, attractive. Each one carried a quiet confidence that Harley had lost somewhere along the highway. Even worse, Harley's Made in America badge had lost its magic. In a globalized industry where even Harley parts were manufactured abroad, patriotic appeal no longer held the same sway. Riders wanted machines they could trust, afford, and enjoy, regardless of where the badge came from. And the foreign invasion wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, it was methodical. It took place in parking lots, on showroom floors, and in the minds of first-time buyers. And it worked. Harley didn't just lose share, it lost relevance. So in a last-ditch effort to reclaim control, Harley turned inward. It made one final move, a gambit that might be its last. Harley's final gambit, and why it may not work. Every empire has its desperate hour. For Harley-Davidson, that hour is now. With Jochen Zeitz stepping down in 2025, the company is scrambling to reset the narrative. The problem? There may be no narrative left to salvage. Internally, Harley's board has initiated a CEO search, signaling that fresh leadership might chart a new path forward. But the criteria seem uncertain. Do they want another outsider to modernize the brand? Or someone rooted in Harley's legacy to restore what's been lost? No one seems to agree. And the clock is ticking. Externally, Harley has begun teasing what looks like a throwback strategy. Rumors swirl of a knucklehead revival, a return to the Evolution engine, and even reissues of legendary frames like the FXR. The plan is clear. Get back to basics, revive the magic, and win back the disillusioned core. But can nostalgia fix a structural problem? The press releases sound promising, the social media posts are polished, but on the ground the results are shaky. Dealerships are still closing, young riders are still hesitant, the Livewire brand is bleeding cash, and Harley's core touring models remain out of reach for most American buyers. Even Harley's own forecasts paint a grim picture. In 2025, every major division, motorcycle sales, financial services, even parts and merchandise is projected to decline. The LiveWire electric division alone is expected to post an operating loss of up to $80 million on just a few thousand units sold. So what's left? A few reboots, a changing of the guard, and a brand that still doesn't know who it wants to be. If this final push fails, if the new CEO cannot restore faith, if the new models cannot spark desire, then Harley isn't just in trouble. It's done. Because when a legacy brand bets everything on one last throwback, the risk isn't just failure, it's extinction. What if Harley dies? It's a question that used to sound absurd, laughable even, but now it hangs in the air like smoke from a silent engine. What if Harley-Davidson dies? No more Chrome Streak parades at Daytona, no more HOG rides through Redwood Country, no more rumble on the back roads of America. What happens when a cultural institution goes quiet? The impact wouldn't just be economic, though that would be severe. Thousands of dealership employees, factory workers, supply chain vendors, merchandisers, all gone. Communities built around annual Harley events would fade into irrelevance. Tourist towns that depended on rallies would see business evaporate. But deeper than that is what Harley represents. This wasn't just a motorcycle company, it was rebellion. It was blue-collar pride. It was the middle finger on two wheels. It was Americana bottled and sold in steel and leather. If Harley disappears, a part of American identity goes with it. Because Harley always stood for something bigger than the bike. It stood for the idea that freedom could be felt between your legs, under an open sky, without permission. It was a statement. And statements like that are rare in a world increasingly dominated by screens, silence, and sameness. Harley's legacy is hanging by a thread. So what do you think? Can it still be saved? Drop your take in the comments. And if you're into stories like this, hit like and subscribe. We've got more coming.